Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Marianne, and I'll be hosting this session with Dave, who is going to be the presenter, who puts this really useful workshop together. So just before we start, I just want to talk a little bit about Fruto, just so you know what type of projects we work with, and how we run workshops with them. Before that, okay, it's recorded, great. So Fruto is a UX design studio based in Oxford. We design intuitive interfaces and meaningful experience for the web, mobile, and emerging technologies. We work with a variety of sectors such as healthcare, publishing, and education. We work very much as an extension of our clients' team, and very often they have a development team or a design team, and we work and we come as the UX specialists working with them. We work with a variety of clients, and also it varies a lot from global organizations to startups. And just I want to show a few projects where we run workshops with them. So we run a discovery phase for DoctorsNet, which is the UK's largest network of doctors. They have over 200,000 doctors registered on their website. So after some user research and other activities, we run a UX strategy workshop with them to help them prioritize the UX issues and improvements. And at a follow-up project we did for them, where we redesigned their whole website for their members, we run a couple of user interface workshops because we're redesigning a pattern library design system for them. So these were the workshops. In one of them, we did an audit of their system and what components needed to be redesigned, and we needed the project team there with us doing that audit in a workshop. And at the end of the project, we also run a workshop when we were delivering the design system to their design teams and development team. We also did a redesign for our website for Microbit, which is Microbit Educational Foundation. And particularly in terms of workshops, we run user journey workshops as part of the project with the project team as well, to identify the user goals and user needs and best design for them. And we also run workshops with startups such as ClassList, which is a school communications app or a communities app for school parents. We run UX strategy workshops, including a workshop to help the team prioritize the most effective UX improvements, and also co-design workshops is something that we do often. Actually, Dave is currently planning a couple of workshops for startups, and one of them is a co-design workshop. So today, this webinar is about running remote stakeholder workshops. We have Dave Jones, who is going to present and put together this really useful presentation. He's one of our UX designers at Fruto. He has been designing and facilitating workshops for over 12 years with product teams, software engineers, and executives. He has mostly worked in large organizations, engaging internal or partner stakeholders in communications, projects, and product development. Now at Fruto, Dave runs workshops with clients to bring their ideas together and design strategies for achieving their goals. It's over to you now, Dave.
Great, thanks very much. All right, I'll just share my screen. Bring that over here. Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for the intro. There's me, UX designer, picture in different times that was. Anyway, yeah, so as Marina said, I've been doing workshops professionally since 2008, starting with sort of film, photography, design thinking workshops. That's for school kids coming into university as sort of part of widening participation programs. But I had a little think back, and like the first ever workshop I remember doing was in 1999. I was a 16-year-old youth worker, very enthusiastic, and I was sort of corralling a group of my peers into designing a new game activity to teach recycling, to teach about recycling to 7 to 11-year-olds. So that's sort of, my first sort of moment of working with people to try and create something. But as far as stakeholder workshop goes, I guess my more recent work has seen me facilitate workshops for colleagues in journal publishing systems. Matt had a lot of remote collaboration with teams in India and Philippines. Also at Diamond Light Source there, which is a national science facility that has sort of multiple labs, each publishing their own content on the website. So there's lots of stakeholder relationships to manage there, and training and supporting these distributed content owners. At the University of Oxford, I was working for a Research Council funded collaboration that had stakeholders based across lots of different universities. And the aim being to design a new networking platform for this medical imaging network of professionals. So again, there was lots of stakeholder management work and workshops, all the way from product discovery through sort of personas, ideation, and co-design stuff. At Pearson, there was a really big workshop culture at Pearson, which is great. There's plenty of co-creation, ideation, personas, journey mapping, etc. And that was on a sort of wide range of Pearson's different products, with different management teams, technology teams, and again, working with distributed teams over the UK and in India as well. Now at Fruito, so since lockdown, we've met a big upsurge in the sort of need for remote workshops, of course, and that sort of allowed us to fine tune our techniques a bit and get some good solid feedback on what works well for stakeholders and maybe not quite so well. All right, so that's just a bit about me, but the workshop today is, we're going to be looking at some of the tools that we use at Fruito, how we engage with stakeholders, what pre-workshop prep we do, and then going to talk about just briefly some tips on delivering and facilitating these workshops, and sort of cover a couple of templates that we use. I won't spend much time on the workshop templates themselves, but they'll be published and accessible sort of shortly after the workshop. And we'll share links on our Twitter, LinkedIn, and newsletter when they're live. I'm going to talk a little bit about communicating outcomes, how we do that, and then there's a bit of time for Q&A at the end. So as questions, as I go through this, if any questions crop up, there's a little Q&A icon down at the bottom of your screens, should be. So you can open that up, and anything comes up, just pop it in there, and then Mariana will go through the questions at the end. I'd just like to mention here that this webinar doesn't specifically cover circumstances where there are barriers to access. So Miro is a little bit behind with making their platform accessible, and that's the interactive whiteboard tool that we use. But in responding to their questions from the user community, sort of recognizing this and doing a sort of research project in how to improve it. But yeah, if anyone has any questions on accessibility for workshops, I'll do my best to answer at the end. I will be covering a little bit on connectivity issues, bandwidth and stuff a bit later too. Right, so that's what I'm talking about. So a little bit on the tools we use. Now, for scheduling workshops, for those of you who might be working internally, you'll likely have shared calendars so you can see times when people are free. But at Fruito, when we're coming in from the outside to run a workshop, generally the client is best placed to schedule, as they sort of have that visibility on calendars. But at times when the client might be particularly busy, or we might be particularly busy, then what we use is Calendly, which is basically a service that syncs with our calendars. And so that gives us a link to share with the client so they can see our availability. For conferencing, so we've done workshops over Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, a few others as well, all of which are perfectly fine and really good. But we're now using Zoom, as this just has a special breakout room feature, which just makes life a little easier when it comes to doing sort of small group tasks. You can still do breakout rooms with other services, but it's just a bit more manual, there's a bit more admin around it, and I'll cover that later as well. Okay, now for collaborating, I've mentioned Miro already, so we're big fans of Miro here at Fruito. It's easy to use, pretty powerful. It's this interactive whiteboard, which allows you to do all kinds of group activities that you might do on a real whiteboard, plus lots more functionality. So it's got, core features like a task timer, voting, sticky notes, but there's also the ability to embed video, which can be helpful when replaying previous research. You can put in charts and tables. There's a wireframe library. So, there's a bundle of other plugins and things that just make it quite flexible, really. Another good thing about it, I mean, there are others available. Obviously, I hear Mural is pretty good. Jamboard is quite basic, but allows you to do sort of little sticky note exercises on it. And Microsoft Whiteboard, that I think has reportedly slightly better accessibility sort of functionality as well, I think, with screen readers. So if that's a consideration for you there as well. But yeah, we like Miro, so that's what we use. And there's a big community as well of people sharing their Miro templates. So it's a really good resource. So I sort of recommend having a look at that. Right, so just to summarize, so I'll be talking about what we do at Fruito, as I say, to prepare, deliver and follow up on stakeholder workshops, with some little hints and tips along the way that you might find useful, hopefully. I'll go into each area in a lot more depth, but just starting with preparation. So preparation can roughly be split between communication and then resource planning. So the communication, the engaging with your stakeholders beforehand is so important. That's like the crucial bit for me. Reaching those decision makers, the participants as well, to get content and to get buy-in, and then finding your allies as well that can help you during the workshop. That's really useful. The resource planning side, on the prep bit, just general workshop stuff like designing your structure and content, making sure what you've got to be able to run the workshop smoothly. So when talking about delivery, I'll just run through how to get people started, things to keep things fresh as you go, and to keep people on task. Also cover some of the difficulties that can crop up too. So if you have any particular questions, again, about difficulties or any challenges that you've had before, stick them in the Q&A. And then, and the follow-up stuff, just going through some things that you can do to make the best use of your workshop outcomes, and make sure that that workshop was time really well spent and that is going to contribute to the development of your project. Okay, so moving on. So engaging with stakeholders. Now, we find the best way to prepare for workshops is to engage with stakeholders as early as possible. But in an ideal scenario where everyone is enthusiastic about the project as you are, and everyone loves workshops, we know that rarely happens, unfortunately. But people have other priorities. They're not invested in the project as much as you are, maybe. And of course, some people don't actually like workshops. I mean, who knows? But really, the task is about getting people on board, right? We think about this term buy-in. I've used that once, maybe twice already. I don't like buy-in. It's more than buy-in. Buy-in almost sounds like you're trying to sort of trick people in to wanting to do something, and that's not really what's going to be good for the project. You'll have a strong reason for doing your project. There'll be some business rationale. There'll be definitely some reason why your stakeholders should want it to succeed or need it to succeed. But they might just not quite know it yet, or they might not see how it relates to their success in their role, in their particular line of work. So by connecting with those stakeholders, not just the decision makers, but also the ones that might be wary of or even dead against the workshop, and by listening to what they have to say, we found that it sort of really helps us make sure that the workshop can be designed to align to their goals as well. But not only that, it sort of lets them know that we're with them. We're sort of going along this journey with them, and that we're finding our way through the project together. So yeah, instead of seeking out buy-in, what you're really doing, or what we try to do, is nurture advocates for the workshop. You know, we're engendering a sense of ownership and really sort of helping them identify with their stake in the project. And you know, and that helps sort of beyond the workshop as well. All right, so yeah, when engaging with stakeholders, we like to break them up into 3 groups. The decision makers, the allies, and the sort of other general members of the workshop. So decision makers generally are sort of time poor. You know, they got lots of other priorities. Like, gone are the days when you can just grab someone for a coffee, unfortunately. So you know, instead, put in a 15-minute meeting into their calendar and have a structured interview. That's what we do. That's what we found to be quite successful. So the reason that you're doing this is you're checking that the goals and motivations of the decision makers, might be several, align. And if they don't quite align, then you know, you can bring them together and discuss it separately. So that's one aspect of that. But you're also wanting to get some content for the workshop. So for most activities, we like to have a sort of a starting point for discussions to grow from. You know, it's much easier than just having a blank board and trying, you know, okay, guys, go, you know, get people to ideate. So that really helps to have that content. So yeah, so having this sort of focused interview with the decision makers can really gives you the chance to confirm to them what, you know, what key decisions might need to be made, and the impact of those decisions. But yeah, you're checking the goals and you're getting some content for those workshops. So just a quick view on an example of our sort of pre-workshop survey. You know, we use Google Forms so that it just sort of leads the conversation. So it would be, you know, it's generally me filling this out whilst talking to them. But of course, some people might actually prefer just to fill it in themselves. So that's why we have it in a form like this. Yeah, that's not ideal to sort of build rapport with them, but you know, so if you can catch them, then that's better. But if you don't manage to talk through it with them, then another way to sort of just get a bit of rapport with them is to follow up with them with a question that, you know, after they've submitted this, and then that gives you that that sort of opportunity to get a bit of personal contact before the workshop. Okay, so allies. Now, again, the aim is for all participants to be advocates of your workshop. Now, we like to identify allies to help with specific tasks in a workshop, like leading the breakout room activities or feeding back to the wider group, stuff like that. But it's also for sort of soft tasks, like making sure the break activities are on task, and also maybe identifying if there are any particularly quiet participants. But yeah, for us as an agency, our allies are usually the people who are our primary contact with the company, those that we've got the strongest relationship with already. So for those of you in internal teams, again, these might just be your closest colleagues, you know, not necessarily the decision makers, but they can be. So, you know, we'd have the conversation with our allies, again, using that same form to ask about goals and motivations, what success looks like for them. But, you know, you can also sort of just, you know, ask about them if there are particular participants that you might need to, you know, might need a special level of attention, introverts or extroverts in the group, that kind of thing. And really the aim with the allies is just to probe their needs again, so that they get to recognize their stake, and again, by doing so, become advocates for the workshop, almost as sort of co-creators, really. Okay, and your members, so, you know, for the rest of the workshop members, maybe it's less about, less at this stage about sort of detailed sort of engagement and just more about preparing them, really. So, you know, we do a couple of admin tasks before the workshop. That's to get workshop content from them, check that they can register with Miro, but also to get a little insight into the individuals in the group. So again, we use that same survey with them, just sent out by email, and that can sort of indicate how they feel about the workshop as well. So if they don't fill it in, then that sort of gives you a bit of a sense of how engaged they might be. So yeah, at this point, it's sort of less about the content that they're providing, and it's more about recognizing their attitudes to the workshop. Also, we send out a link to register with a Miro board. So it's just a blank board, pretty much asking them to sign up. So just so you know, this is what we use. It just tells them to sort of log in, and that's so we can identify who they are when they come to the workshop board itself. So it doesn't say guest. And yeah, it's got a couple of how to get started and a little practice board for them to play with. But yeah, so these are just some of the instructions on what they have to do. But what happens is once they do register, then we get an email telling us that they registered. So then in our list of people, if we see that people haven't registered, then we can follow up with them and engage with them and see if they've had any problems with it. Yeah, so that's sort of engaging with stakeholders in that sort of early pre-workshop communication level. So once you've started building relationships with your stakeholders and you're sort of ready to design that structure and content of the workshop, yeah, here are just some tips really. It's creating one resource for the whole session is really important. It keeps it simple, it avoids that flipping between a slide deck and a whiteboard or sheets or what have you. So bring it all into one place, and that's where we find Miro to be pretty useful. So they don't get lost going between screens. Have few concise achievable aims, again keeping it simple, those core aims, and those pre-workshop conversations can really confirm what those aims are. Go for shorter sessions if you can with remote workshops. Being able to stay engaged for longer is harder than physical workshops. So we generally say a maximum of 2 hours, and if you do that, anything more than an hour, have a 10-minute break halfway through. If you've got like a big massive workshop to do, maybe like a design sprint or something, go for multiple sessions where you can give homework tasks in between with a sort of a short deadline after the workshop. So that a sketching activity is really useful for that. So give them half an hour after the workshop, do your sketches, send it to us, and then we put it up on the board ready for discussion in the next session. If you've got a large group, divide them up into teams, 5+ participants. If you've got more than 5, 6 or more, yeah, you want to do group exercises, then you can split up and do breakout rooms. And again, I'll show you the breakout rooms in a bit. And then once they've done their task, they then come back and report back to the group. Okay, so content-wise, what we do to prepare, I've mentioned having one resource for the whole session. It means presenting your research and your activities in that same space. So in Miro, we'll see shortly, I'll open it up in a moment, the spaces in which you present or run activities. So they're called frames, sort of same as a slide in a slide deck. So the content that you've gathered before from your stakeholder engagement interviews, surveys, other research. So that's, you pull that all into your Miro board. The next one there, prepare your research narrative. So, we're a narrative species. We remember things much more easily and identify with them more strongly when, there's a story connected to it. So to engage your participants with the context of the activity, to, consider framing that gathered research in the form of a story that tells you how you got to this point. So it can just be a basic linear narrative of the steps taken. But if you can bring in some anecdotes on the human side of the research participants, that can really help. I think storytelling in UX, that's probably another webinar we could do, Mariana. Okay, and organize your frames for easy navigation. So those frames or slides. So in the same way that you want to tell a narrative with your research, it's important that your frames in Miro are organized in a way that suits the narrative of the workshop as well. So generally, chronological order of the frames you want to go through. Just have a quick come to this one. So, we've got our boards here, it's really crucial that you spend a bit of time organising the boards in a way that makes sense for you. All right, so yeah, just going to move on to delivery. So some tips for delivery. So yeah, I'll open up Miro again in a moment and show a couple of sort of workshop introduction, engagement and activity templates and talk through some of those. But yeah, there are a lot of different workshops that you can do with stakeholders. I'll only touch on a few, but there's I'll share these slides later after the workshop, but there's a good link there for some of the sort of foundational UX activities, workshop activities. You can then take those and modify them to best suit your workshops. So, but yeah, for reference, do a warm-up activity, get them used to the board. Be aware of the dynamic of the group. You know, that will have been done through your research before. So know who you need to engage with more, perhaps individuals, or who you might need to be wary of moving a conversation on with. Another thing is to look in on the breakout rooms when they're doing the exercises. This can help you sort of get a sense of if you need to sort of come in and do some extra facilitation in there. Have periodic questions, Q&A sessions, and that can just help punctuate your activities if you've got several activities. And that gives also just a bit of breathing space for people to sit and think a bit about what they're about to do. And there's just sort of a nice breather for you as a facilitator to have a sip of water or take a breath. And yeah, and I think something simple but so crucial, having a visible timer for your tasks. That really helps keep everyone on track, you included. So just a few pitfalls here. I haven't sort of gone, you know, through. I haven't got a big long list here, but just some of the key ones. Really, again, put your questions in the Q&A if you've got any specifics. But for those people who are not registered or didn't register in time for the workshop on Miro, you know, if they've not done it before the day before, then you can send a little reminder email. But if they turn up to the workshop in the link, you know, they'll still be prompted to sign in. So it's not sort of too big a deal, but it just might take a few moments whilst people do that before you start the workshop. And then again, the benefit of that is so you can see the name of each cursor. So for low connection, low bandwidth, this can happen if you've got lots of images in your Miro board. So, you know, what you can do, if there are individuals having sort of connection issues, just get everyone to turn off their videos. That sort of reduces it a bit. Shouldn't need to be screen sharing, but if you are, you can turn that off too. And, you know, and get them to sort of close any background apps or windows that might be running, taking some of that energy. If you don't have much rapport with the group, I mean, that's usually taken care of with the sort of previous engagement that you've done. But during exercises, you can just sort of keep probing, keep asking open questions to specific individuals. You know the names of the people that are in your workshop and target people. If in the breakout rooms, you know, you can ask your allies that are leading those breakout rooms to sort of drop you a quick chat message or something if it's difficult, and you can then go in and yeah, do some facilitation there if need be. As for moving the conversation on or keeping people on task, again, the timer is a really good tool for this. You know, you can just fall back on the fact that you've got limited time. You know, good phrase. Oh, I'm just going to come in here. I'm just going to interrupt you here. We need to focus on blah blah blah. So I think remote workshops actually help a bit with that, because you've got that level of sort of anonymity, that slight barrier, that sense of barrier between you and the participants, where it's a bit easier to just sort of break into a conversation that's going on. Obviously, it can take a little bit of time to work out if that is actually a useful conversation to have, but you know, you just sort of be the judge of that. Okay, so that's some delivery tips. So I'm just going to now go to Miro and talk through some of these boards that we've got here. So when introducing a session, so as you see, I've organized all the boards down here, and I'm going to talk about some of the detail of how we've got this set up in a moment. In fact, I'll just come out, I'll just zoom out so you can see, just got a few sort of introducing the session boards, a few boards on research playback, just some templates you can use, then a few workshop boards for personas, empathy map, journey workshop, page flows. So I'm really going to focus my time on this sort of introducing your session on these pages here, and then sort of just light touch on the other bits. So go using the navigation here. This is something that you'll talk to your participants about, is how you navigate the board, but always start with, introducing the session with your aims and your running order. We introduce who the team is, who's doing what, if Mariana or Carmen are doing moderating or, looking at the chat, things like that. And they'll be introduced in the session as well. As I've mentioned, just a short list of achievable aims, nice and concise. If you've got any specific questions that you want to ask, or particular instructions that you want to emphasize, then you can sort of add sticky notes to bring sort of a bit of attention to them. This next board, this is the bit where they start interacting with the board. So you can sort of mention about zooming in and out to navigate. And then this is the key bit, really, this opening your frame. So you point them to the little icon down the bottom, open your frames, and then they can navigate through. Now, the reason why this is really important is because what users find, or participants find difficult, especially if it's just one person on one laptop with one screen, is this sort of difficulty around, do I look at a screen being shared, or do I look at the board, the whiteboard itself? How do I flip between these screens? Now, how I like to do it, how we do it here at Fruito, is we generally don't share our screen. We'll have the conference stuff running in the background, but we'll basically be getting people to just open the Miro board and to just be in there. And then we sort of tell them, okay, guys, now go to frame 4, and then they'll go to frame 4, or, wherever we are then taking the workshop, we'll tell them, okay, click on this frame, and then they'll go there. So that's how, why it's really important that they know how to navigate the frames. And then there's this sort of, just a little thing about annotating the board, adding sticky notes and what have you. It can really help with, to help with sort of engagement. Again, if you can have pictures of the people at your workshop, and you can get them to put a little sticky note or a comment with their name and their role. That can help as well if you've got a big group who maybe don't know each other. Instead of taking time to go through and do introductions, you've got a nice little space here where people can do that. Okay, now for breakout rooms, as I mentioned, Zoom has a breakout room function. So, you basically click a button and then it splits off already assigned people into their breakout room for an allotted amount of time. So simple. But if you don't have that, if you're using Hangouts or Teams or any other tool, you can just create a new meeting link and link to it on a breakout room board. So, if it's, you just create that and put the link there. What we do is like to have our allies highlighted, the people who are sort of maybe leading the conversations or facilitating those exercises. But you don't have to do that. Just sort of, and if the sort of dynamic, if you feel like the dynamic demands that. And then you can also, have the team specific frames down the bottom. So for example, if you're doing a user journey workshop, I've got that example down here. So go to, user journeys, you'd have one master board where you might be talking through the exercise first. But then you might then have, okay, this is team 1's user journey board, and then they'll go through and do their exercise together. Team 2 be doing the same. And then at the end of that, the teams feedback what they've done, and then you can create a master board or annotate on top of their boards. Oops. Okay. So yeah, so when you've got your frames there, if we're in the breakout rooms, you're telling them, okay, team 1, all right, we're doing user journeys, that's number 16. So hit that, it takes you straight there. Okay, so they're the sort of introduction boards I wanted to take you through there. Just going to spend a little bit of time here now on the research playback boards. So there are, so for introducing, so these are really useful for sort of introducing your exercise. You know, you want to come to your workshop, you want to plan your workshop so that you have the research that's underpinning the workshop, that's feeding into it. So again, you want to be able to tell the story of the research before you go into the task. So we've just got a few just example boards here where you might do quantitative data. You can bring in tables and charts using the Miro apps here, really useful. But you know, have your aims, who you did aims of the research, who you did the research with, you know, a bit about methods and any limitations that you used, and sort of tell your story. That's a bit, you know, charty, but and then, you know, for a qualitative one, again, same sort of format. You've got your aims of that research, who did it, what method you used, any limitations, and then just sort of really get those key findings, those sort of key insights up there. And then what you can do is you can, to help tell the story, link to a video that you might have captured where you might have users talking about it. But having your, you know, the goal, behavior, or need as that sort of key finding. We've got a couple of sort of more basic, generic ones, and we sometimes use these for the post-workshop playback sessions as well, where sort of highlighting just sort of key insights. So yeah, you can sort of, they're pretty flexible, but it's really, you know, getting some key points and then any quotes maybe, or you know, what led to the conclusion of these insights. Okay, and so they're some of the research playback boards. Yeah, I'm not really going to get into detail on these workshop templates here, but just a little thing on personas. Maybe we've got a couple of sort of introduction persona templates here, because, you know, if you're doing a persona workshop, it might be that you're doing that with people in sales or customer support, people who might be quite close with customers or users. So they might not be, you know, too au fait with personas, why we use them. So just a bit of introduction there. Yeah, and then, you know, you might have a draft persona here that you then might want groups to ideate or sort of validate or put their ideas onto, and then a slightly more detailed one. But I think one key thing when you are talking about your personas and how you've got there is about the story of that user. So it's really key to tell the story of that user, get the people in the workshop to understand, you know, what their life is like, you know, you know, reiterating any of the crucial information that might be in the challenges or goals or needs. And then, you know, if your breakout groups or your exercise develops these boards, then you can sort of add extra stickies onto here for, you know, to sort of help flesh them out or change them, or to flag up if something's, you know, a complete error or something. All right, so yeah, so that's it really as far as the boards go. As I say, these will be published I think a few days after this session. I think maybe a little bit of tidying up here and there, but we'll get them out there and we'll sort of publicize that when you can go into them. But next, I think I'll just go back to talking about the reporting of outcomes then, how we go about that. So yeah, some of the steps we take here. So first of all, we do a debrief with the team who are involved, or the allies, just to see what worked, what didn't work. This is a good time to go through some of the boards and collate some of the information and identify those key insights that you want to then report back. Sending thank you emails, I mean, it's just like a bit basic really, but something in with just thanking them for their time. You know, you want to, this isn't just a one-off relationship with these people. You know, just something that's going to be brief and positive. You know, you might have a little personal insight from the workshop, nothing too big, but you know, something that happened, something funny that happened or something. But you know, or some good progress in a particular area. But the key bit really being stating what you're going to be doing next. So, you know, processing the workshop outcomes, you know, you'll arrange a playback session and create a document to share. But also importantly in that email is a link to a feedback survey, and anonymize it if you can, if you're able to. But yeah, just really sort of let them know how important it is for you to get their honest feedback. Okay, so yeah, arrange a playback session. So, you know, get it in their calendar early. Invite those other sort of project stakeholders who weren't part of the workshop. You know, obviously, if you're not sure, you just sort of speak to your allies or whoever's closer to the project to know who's needs to be involved in that session. Recording your outcomes and insights in a shared document. So, I mean, I'll expand on this a little bit in the next slide, but you know, something that you can share that makes sense for the company, for who you're doing it for. So just a quick look in Miro. So Miro has a thing where you can save specific boards as a PDF or as images. So, you know, as I mentioned, we might use some of these playback boards and then export them as PDF. So you can do that, but you can also, you know, there's a facility to record yourself talking through boards as well, if that's your thing. And that can be really useful for future reference as well. But yeah, and so once you've recorded your outcomes, you've got your shared document, then publicize that. You know, if you have capacity, obviously, you know, I think it's a bit of a nice to have sometimes in big projects, but can be a really powerful thing to do, especially in organizations where UX might be a bit less mature, just to let others know about the workshop, you know, what the outcomes were and what the next steps will be. So, you know, this doesn't just generate interest in the project itself, but it showcases to the organization the availability of this effective resource of workshops and the impact that can be had when a group of motivated and engaged people sort of come together with a shared goal. That can be really useful. Yeah, so just a little bit more on documenting your outcomes and insights. Make sure it's presentable so you can talk people through it, and readable so that people can understand it if you're not presenting. And make sure it's clear and concise, you know, that the insights are very visible, clearly written, straight to the point, no jargon. Another couple of things to consider, you know, don't overdo your documentation. Consider your audience, what they want to hear, and what they might have time for. Might just be those basic insights and the next steps, rather than, you know, the tour of a complete workshop. So yeah, there are sort of tips around creating that documentation. Okay, so yeah, so that's how we prepare. A bit whistle stop, I feel, you know, done a lot of talking there. I hope you've been able to concentrate. I would find it difficult listening to someone babble on for that long, but I hope it's been all right. But anyway, yeah, that's how we do it. How we prepare, deliver and follow up on our workshops. These slides will be available shortly after the session. And again, we'll publicize the Miro templates once they're live, but that's about it from me. I think it's question time now, right?
Great, thanks, Dave. I found it really useful, so you know, I hope our attendees found it useful as well, and people who are watching the recording later on. We've got one question from Ian. Would you typically have several people running a session, and who does what? Do you ever get a client to help facilitate?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the workshop, but yes, we do get people in, clients to help facilitate. So that was talking about the allies. I think in general, I mean, obviously you have to see the lay of the land, see what the clients want to do, or if they've done them before. If it can help you as a facilitator, I find, to sort of assign jobs, to moderate breakout sessions, as I've said before. But I find that maybe, the onus is not on them to deliver a workshop. If we're being brought in to do a workshop, then depending on their capacity, we'll sort of generally just take it all on. Within our team, we might have, as I say, other people moderating or taking sessions. But I've also had sessions where it's just been me facilitating a large group and several groups as well. Not remotely, actually. I've not done that remotely. I suppose the biggest one where I've done it on my own remotely was having two breakout rooms. But so it's not impossible, but it's just about sort of hopping around if it is just you. But yeah, certainly if you think that your clients or other team members are into supporting it, want to even learn more about facilitation, or you just need an extra pair of hands, yeah, get people involved.
Great. We have another question from Ian. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, feel free to add to the Q&A. We have a little bit of time now. So the question is, have you had good feedback from clients on this format? Yeah, we have. I think what clients maybe don't, or what I've experienced is clients sort of expecting it to be really difficult, expecting it to be, a challenge to keep concentrating, all the technology around it. But to be honest, I find it in a lot of ways a lot more effective to do workshops remotely. It's very different, but managing a room full of people and going to different tables or what have you, when you've got lots of noise, ambient noise, things like that, lots of physical resources that you need to take care of and organize and things like that, it's that's a particular challenge. But in a remote workshop, you can sort of, it's easier to focus their attention on you as a presenter or facilitator, and then when you do need to probe and prompt, if you find that difficulty with rapport, then it's just being aware of that's sort of pre-research you've done, that engagement you've done beforehand should give you an idea of who and where you might need to do the the extra follow-ups with, or to prompt. But yeah, another bit of positive feedback from clients is around the follow-up stuff. The fact that once you've done your workshop, whereas in a physical workshop you've got a whiteboard full of stuff you've got to take pictures of and transcribe the notes, awful. But with Miro or any other whiteboard, it's there digitally, you can export it. That makes it much quicker. So for clients to have what the actual whiteboards ended up as, plus your sort of key insight boards that you can very quickly and easily knock up, has been a benefit to some of our clients. Great. I'm smiling here because you don't miss those like piles and piles of post-its that you need to actually make sense after the workshops. We have another question here from Eamon, who asked, any tips on running a workshop for the first time? For running a workshop for the first time, well, I think do
do some, I mean, coming to something like this is really useful, I think. You know, go and look on Nielsen Norman Group website for all of their workshop resources. There is lots and lots of resources out there. So, you know, do a little bit of reading, again, engaging with stakeholders, but I think maybe one of the big things might be practicing. You know, if you can find a colleague or a friend, family member, whoever, to just run through it once, twice, however many times as you have the patience for, but that can really help, because I mean, I don't do sort of full-on sort of practice sessions with colleagues, or but what I do is I'll just sort of talk through what I'm going to be doing, and then I'll realize, oh no, that's not going to work there, and I'm going to move that bit there. So just having that bit of feedback from someone, even if they're not even contributing, it's just you hearing yourself out loud, can really help. So yeah, do your research, talk with your stakeholders first, and have a bit of practice.
Brilliant. I guess these are all the questions. If you have any other questions after the webinar, feel free to drop us a line, either Dave or I a line, and we're more than happy to answer. And if you want to know more about next webinars, there is one coming up in August, on the 27th of August, which is practical creation and application of a UI color palette. This will be done by Carmen, who is also on the call, is one of our UX and UI designers. And we're going to publish, the aim is to have webinars regularly. So we're going to be publishing them on our social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also on our newsletter, which is on this slide, the link to the newsletter. Great, so thank you very much for attending, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.